So imagine the track is getting rubbered in, lap times are improving, and you feel comfortable trying one sprocket down because you believe that you can extrapolate a little bit of performance. Maybe you didn't even decide it, it's just your mechanic told you, or like the engine tuner decided, because yeah, it makes sense, you carry more speed through the corners, therefore the RPM are gonna be raised up, and therefore you can try to take that longer gear that it's gonna benefit in the mid to top range. Especially if there's a limiter, you're gonna postpone that limiter. That's the case in 60 Mini, juniors, seniors here in Italy, WSK races. But if you're driving like in X30 or Rock or Rotax, pretty much, you don't have any limiter, so you're still gonna get a benefit when you're going long on this sprocket. If the track is getting faster, you're still gonna get the benefit in the mid to top, but it's gonna be, I would say, less severely than what you have with limiter engines, because obviously when there's a limiter you can't go any faster, but obviously you can postpone the limiter, as I said, with the sprocket. But if you're, I don't want to digress, but yeah, with X30, with Rotax and with Rock, basically getting them a bit more mid to top. But it always depends whether you got the slip sim or not and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't want to make it complicated. The main goal of this chapter is to analyze how you can extrapolate lap time from your driving. So what would you do differently? Well, if you ask me, I wouldn't drive too different, okay? I wouldn't be like, oh, I have the longest sprocket, I have to drive so much different. No, I think it's something that should anyways built into your driving style. So smoothness. If you are driving with a lower sprocket, essentially, by definition, your RPMs, the minimum RPMs is going to be lower. Your all RPM are going to be shifted lower, okay? Period. So your average RPM in a lap, if you look at the average on your AIM, for example, when you look at the data, it's going to be shifted down. It's going to be like 100, 200 RPMs less, so about 200 RPMs less. So if you were driving exactly the same and you were doing, for instance, like 8,000 RPM in your minimum speed, in minimum RPM in a like slow speed corner near hairpin. So let's say in Lonato, the second hairpin of the last sector, that's typically like 7,400, 7,500. That's the minimum RPM in Mini, for example. So if you just change the sprocket and didn't change the driving and anything else, that's gonna be like minus 200 pretty much, for what you were doing. And so yeah, it's gonna be like minus 200. So from 7,400 is gonna be 7,200. Now obviously you're gonna have less pull on the X. You're gonna feel like the engine is a bit lazy, but it's not like it's lazy because of the carburation. It's gonna be just like a little bit less power. Like the power delivery will be shifted forward. So the power delivery will be shifted more in the mid-range, mid to top, pulling you a little bit later in the limiter, and also the mid is going to be slightly better. The main difference is noticed more at the top. But if you are such a clean driver, such a smooth in your steering wheel, and you don't scrub too much speed in the middle of the corners, you're probably going to be able to compensate slightly for that by getting on the gas, let's say half a meter earlier in the corners. By doing so, instead of having that 200 RPM gap in the middle of the corner, let's say, just do this sprocket, maybe you're going to bring that to only 100 or 150 or like 80, 120. Like it's going to be less severe, the difference in sprockets, than if you just drop the same. Or let's say you drove even worse, because sometimes drivers, it happens rarely. It rarely happens. But imagine if you go one sprocket longer and you don't drive the same, you don't drive better, but you actually drive worse. So let's say you drive more like V-shaped and you stop the car a bit too much, then you're going to be like paying it twice costly. All right. Yeah. So I hope you understand what I'm talking about. But I wouldn't be drastically change your driving. So I would just be a bit more mindful. I wouldn't start to brake earlier. I wouldn't start to brake early, gas early. I just don't think that's the right thing to do. Because when you start to brake early, gas early, yes, you're going to be compensating a little bit on the exit. But all of the time that you lose on the entry, if it's a bit like quite a bit earlier than what you would have to be braking, all of that time that you lost on the entry, you're not going to recuperate it on the exit or even the top. But obviously it depends from track to track, right? We're talking about just a few selective corners that we have to possibly bring it back by like half a meter on the entry to get a really good mid exit, then I'm totally fine with it. But I wouldn't start to brake like 2, 3, 4 meters earlier just to compensate and getting a really good mid to exit speed. As I said, I believe that at the end of the day, the moments when you go on the longer sprockets are the moments where you need to. It's like when the track is getting gripped up, you are going new tires, the lap times are going down, therefore the track feels quite fast, there's good grip, and it's just no brainer to go a sprocket down. Right? You definitely are not going to go a sprocket down if the lap times are getting slower, if the track is getting slippier, if the tires are getting screwed, like more than one word. So at the end of the day, I think it's just a natural process when you go on a lower sprocket. Think about it. I really believe it. So you shouldn't be getting too stressed about it. You shouldn't be changing your driving too much. And as I said, you should always monitor quite carefully your minimum RPMs, because when you do that, you're going to essentially be okay. Right? My minimum RPMs today are 7,400. If tomorrow the lap time is like a second slower and it's like 7,200 or 7, and then I drive as well as I could, but like I could never get above that, then I know I would have to go one sprocket shorter, so one more. All right. So let's say I had 76, I go 77. But yeah, vice versa. If you were doing 7,400 and the next day you feel like, oh, the track's so fast, almost like a second faster, and we're doing 7,600, 7,700, and again, it's a no-brainer. You should put a sprocket down so that it's gonna make that 200 difference. It's gonna rebalance it, I would say. But yeah, so I would suggest you to keep monitoring the RPMs traces very, very carefully in your data. You don't have to be a data guy. Just learn how to just open your whatever that like telemetry analysis software you're using, whether you're using Alfano, AIM, Unipro, whatever. Just like learn how to download sessions, learn how to just click on the sessions to load them up on the chart, and then it's quite straightforward. You don't have to be a spatial engineer to understand each sensor or each variable in the data. So I would suggest you just keep monitoring it. Though you have to be careful with the RPM, the minimum RPMs, because when you're locking the tires on the brakes, when you're locking the rears, it's gonna basically pump up it's gonna basically make a peak. It's gonna be a pretty low peak. So it's gonna be like 4,000, 5,000 RPMs. It could be that low the peak. Therefore, don't be like, oh, I got 4,000 RPMs, and I just look at the minimum RPMs. Oh, then I have to go higher on this rocket. Then no, that's bullshit. It doesn't work like that. You should be forgetting about the peak on the brakes, because whatever sprockets you have, it's not going to affect the peak on the brakes. I mean, it will, but forget about it. You have to look after the peak in the mid corner, like the lowest RPMs in the mid corner, right? And then, as I said, you always want to keep track of the RPM limiter at the top if you're sitting. So let's say you should have an idea of what's the maximum amount of time you should be spending on the limiter, or as I like to see it, the most amount of meters. So let's say on average I like to see 40 meters or 50 meters or 60 meters, whatever is your value on average based also on the engine tuner, like total time spent to the limiter. All right, then if you see that time is getting shorter or longer, if the track is getting faster, then you have, okay, it's straightforward. So at the end of the day, I think that even AI, even just like some automatic AI data analysis software should be doing it, like should be telling you the sprocket, should be telling you what sprocket to be running compared to the one you have. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, it's just like once you know the parameters, okay, I want to have minimum RPMs like that. I want to have that much of time sitting in the limiter. Then, if you open if you open the data and you see that you got so much more RPMs everywhere because the track has got so much faster all of a sudden, or maybe because your radius of the tires, by the way, think about it, the radius of the tires and the radius of the rims have a big impact. So at the end of the day, what is the important one is the radius of the tire. Okay, but that is highly affected by the rim. So if the rim is a very wide rim, let's say, like a very long rim, it's gonna make the tire squash. And then you're gonna have more RPMs. It's gonna work like the lower the radius, the more RPMs. Okay, so it's like the shorter the sprocket. The higher the radius, the longer the RPM, therefore the longer the sprocket. Yeah, I was like, did I say longer RPM? I wanted to say the lower the RPMs. Okay, so you have to take that into consideration. So for example, if for some reason like you pick up a new set of tires and 1 centimeter smaller in diameter, like radius, and because of that, and the track is getting really fast, then you basically got shorter, right? You're basically getting shorter because of the radius, and therefore it's like you have too much RPMs, and there you make too many RPMs, and there you want to go one sprocket less. You know what I mean? But in terms of driving, as I said, you wouldn't want to do too much difference. You would, as I said, prioritize the mid exit. That's always the case, but I wouldn't go to an extent that you sacrifice so much the entry, because by doing so, then your overall lap time will be a loss. In that case, I would rather go a sprocket up with more bottom so that you can attack the entries. All right, and yes, you're gonna have still a good exit because the sprocket helps you. You're gonna give you the initial pickup, but again, it's highly dependent on the grip level on the track. And again, it shouldn't be too long. What I've noticed though is that for training drivers how to drive smoothly, that is a really good way. Going long on the sprocket deliberately, like 2-3 sprockets, that's a really good way to just train. Because think about it, when you make a mistake and you're 2-3 long, let's say you're supposed to go 75, but you actually deliberately want the kid to improve. So let's say that the kid is not the best yet, so it's like half a second off, and you see that he's doing mistakes, he's not using the track properly, you see he's not getting on the throttle at the right time, he's missing the apexes, etc. One of the best ways to make him learn while he drive, like to make him understand that, is when he gets punished by the mistake. And what's the best way to get him to be punished by a mistake is to feel it. And what's the best way to feel it? Well, you can't shoot at him and be like, oh, notice it. Or like you don't have a radio connection, be like, oh, you just fucked up. Like, no, you need to basically give him a low sprocket, because when he's going to go on the throttle and his RPMs are too low because he hasn't done a proper corner, like say he hasn't used the track enough, therefore the corner is tighter, and therefore you're not going to have a good minimum speed, or he missed the apex when the gas on the gas too late. If he does all these things, or some of these things, then he's obviously going to have lower RPMs, but with the smaller sprocket, he's going to notice it way more than if he had a bigger sprocket. So the mistake costs twice, I like to say. You pay the price twice. It's double. And that's a really good way for teaching kids how to drive more smoothly and more cleanly and like better overall. And I've used that technique lots of times, and I still do it. And I noticed that, I need to drive perfect, because if you don't drive perfect, you're gonna be slower for sure. No problem. Like, you're gonna be slower than if you drove the perfect sprocket. But as I said, you shouldn't treat every session as a qualifying. No, I mean, like, it's more important to get the kid to learn rather than treating every session like qualifying of the world championship. You know what I mean? So sometimes when you're on the track, let's say you're the driver, or let's say you're the parent, and you don't know like what to try or like what to do, instead of just driving laps and round, try to really put like a very small sprocket on the kid and try to get him to extrapolate everything from the car and try to perfect his driving by running on a small sprocket. You'll see that he's gonna be using more track, because if he doesn't use all the track available, he's gonna the bottom is going to it's gonna struggle a lot, and he's gonna notice it. But as I said, it's gonna be a medicine, a pill he has to swallow, so that he is going to become faster later on. So let me know in the comments if you agree with some of the things, or if you disagree. I mean, we may have different opinions on some things. I'll be happy to change my opinion. But let me know. I'm curious. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.